Okay, everyone, if we turn off our phones and turn on our attention, Kerry Cassidy, everybody, thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay, that was the fastest introduction I've ever had. What I'm going to do right now is, hi everyone, I am going to play a movie, a short excerpt from the work I do, Project Camelot. And first of all, let me ask, how many people know Project Camelot?
Yeah.
You're not here by accident. Okay, good to know. It just tells me where I can go with my talk. You know, I can get into some stuff. Obviously, you guys are well versed. So I'm going to play. This is a compilation of clips that was actually put together a year after we were, in operational. Myself and Bill Ryan, who is English, and it was my partner for. Let's see, I've been in operation for 7 years, so he was my partner for 4 of those years, and then for the last 3 years, I've been running Project Camelot by myself, with the help of my webmaster. And that has been quite an experience, I must say. So I'm going to play this short for you, and it was all about preparing for 2012. Obviously, we've made it over that horizon. But the information here is very valid, and it will give you a great introduction if you don't know my work. Otherwise, I've never been able to put this on the internet because I stole all the movie clips from major motion pictures, and the rights issues and the music, we couldn't get away with that. So this only gets shown at conferences. So if you haven't been to any of my conferences, you've never seen this, and it's never been on the web. So. Oh, and it's quite short. It's like, I don't know, 10 minutes or less. Is there anyone here that had not heard of Project Camelot, just so we can be sure? Yeah, so you guys are getting up to speed. Okay. So at this point, what I normally do is go through a whole sort of overview of what the information is that we've come across, and in some ways I'll call it short circuit things, because we're moving along in this trajectory, and here we are in England, and you are really in the sort of belly of the beast of the Illuminati here, if you don't mind my saying so, and so things are really escalating at a very rapid rate. So I'm going to kind of go through things quickly, and then hopefully we can have time for questions. They want to give me about an hour and 15 minutes or thereabouts. So the last half hour, I need someone to say, when I've been going for 45 minutes, sort of raise their hand or wave at me, and then I'll go into the question session, and then you guys can ask questions, and we'll go like that. I'm wondering if it's okay if I grab this mic, because it's easier for me if I can move around a little. Yeah? Is that okay if I just take it out of its... Yeah, thank you. Okay, so basically, Project Camelot started because I was a frustrated filmmaker. I'd hit a glass ceiling in Hollywood, and I decided to go out and take my consumer-grade camcorder. Had a small inheritance my mother passed on, and I decided to go interview people that were speaking on the circuit, talking about UFOs, and put a camera in front of their face and basically ask them if they'd seen a UFO. And I had been studying the esoteric for, most of my life at that point. I'd studied Eastern philosophy. I meditated and connected all my chakras, had massive Kundalini awakening experiences, and had studied all kinds of treatises and you name it, Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, various religious things, and et cetera, in order to gain an understanding of what enlightenment was, and then to be able to convey to others. And so that's kind of was my trajectory. And then I decided that making movies was the best way to wake people up. So I went down to Hollywood. I came from Northern California. My family told me that I was crazy, that was the belly of the beast. going to LA, the din of inequity, so to speak, and so on. But I was always very strong-willed, so I basically did what I wanted to do. I went to NYU School of Film and Television back east. I was accepted there at a certain point in the trajectory, and I went for about 2 or 3 weeks. I dropped out of there and decided to study with a private teacher called who studied with Sanford Meisner, Robert X. Modica, and I went to Carnegie Hall and studied at night, acting for 6 hours after work, from 6 at night until 12 midnight, acting and directing. And so that's kind of where I really learned a lot of my chops in the motion picture industry, and what helped me later when I was involved in interviewing people and getting a good performance, what I call a performance, but it's truth. But it's still, in order to get the truth out of someone, it's not just as simple as putting a camera in front of their face. You need to work with them. And especially with whistleblowers, I found that I had a inborn skill or talent or whatever at getting at the root of a question and getting a person to answer me without giving me a lot of going around the point, and so on. So that has served me well throughout my time in Project Camelot. Again, we've been in operation for over 7 years at this point. You can appreciate that even after just 1 year, we had amassed an amazing group of whistleblowers, some of whom came from projects working for the government, above top secret clearances, and to this day I continue to get above top secret information from whistleblowers. I have to say that WikiLeaks came after us, and Julian Assange wrote to us. I believe we might have even inspired the idea for WikiLeaks. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just simply saying that we were in operation long before they were even an idea in somebody's head. So along those lines, this is sort of a random list of the kinds of people that we've interviewed, just their roles. And I think it can be fairly interesting to somebody looking to see what kind of witnesses we have. And we've now got footage, over 300 hours, audio and video footage. I've got a radio show on Friday nights on Revolution Radio, in case you don't know that. I have been on American Freedom Radio also in the past on Wednesday nights. I narrowed down to 1 day a week because I was supposed to start writing the Camelot book. We need to have a book out there. A lot of people have asked us to do so. It's just unbelievable that the past 7 years have been nonstop for me. Bill and I started working round the clock from the day we hit the ground running with the idea to do what was basically getting the truth out. And I, as a documentary filmmaker, combined my skills and writer with Bill Ryan, who was a webmaster and a writer. And it was just our talents sort of blended very well. And from then on, we just never looked back. We just got this idea to do this, and we went on a trip to Tintagel here in England, and that's one of the former homes of King Arthur, as you may know. And we were both very inspired by the King Arthur Round Table. And so that basically became the basis for the idea that we hatched right then and there, that we would take my camera and go around and start interviewing whistleblowers, and specifically whistleblowers from above top secret clearances. And we realized that no one was doing that. There had been the Stephen Greer project years before that never sort of went very far. They stopped. They actually did a lot of filming back then, but were sitting on their footage and wouldn't release it because they wanted it to be like Hollywood quality. And I had gone to film school at UCLA, NYU for a few weeks. UCLA, I was part of a short fiction film program that I was accepted as a writer, what was their first writer, director, producer, a hyphenate in that program, and did the full program. Actually didn't get to shoot all of my film at that time because I couldn't raise the money. But I got the whole thing together and it was ready to shoot and so on. So that was the beginnings, and from that point on, we just basically went out and did it. And we had incredible magical connection with our path and with what we set out to do. And there's no doubt in my mind that we had a large support from the unseen world, from the ETs that are visiting us, et cetera, et cetera. I've always been an intuitive. I've had a lot of connections with the unseen world my whole life, been fairly psychic, and also learned remote viewing a bit at one point. And I have had prophetic dreams that have come true. So that was also something that aided us in deciding who to interview. A lot of people said, well, how do you decide who to interview, etc. And as we started going, what we had to learn was how to discern truth from falsity, how to be able to suss a witness or a potential witness out, and figure out where they were and what they were really coming across with, how much truth they had to deliver. And it's never all truth or all falsity. As you may know, if you've been out there questing for a while, what you get and what you look for are the nuggets of truth, which are really substantial, and that helps you to build what we call the big picture. And we know that there are many people out there, many organizations trying to do something similar at this point. At the time we started, we were really grassroots. We became a sort of a movement. We had an incredible response in the public around the world. It was just phenomenal, the kind of response we had. And I can say that we have supported Project Camelot through donations for the past 7 years. Ever since I ran out of money, initially the first year and a half to 2 years, I funded it out of my mother's inheritance that she gave me. Wasn't very much money, but it was enough for us because we lived very simply. And traveled like in Bill's old car all over Europe, flying for very little and all that stuff, and staying in dodgy places and so on. So that's what we did. It was very unusual at the time. Anyway, at this point, we've got a lot of people out there doing the same things, and that's a great thing. That's a compliment when somebody goes out and does something similar, interviews people. Now it's really taken off on the web, obviously. There's a tremendous amount of information out there. The trouble you have at this point is weeding through truth from fiction. And I just want to urge people, because I get a lot of feedback. People write to me all kinds of things, some flattering, some not so flattering. But a lot of people tend to miss the point. We are not here to be given truth on a platter. Okay, if you did that, you would not learn or grow any mental muscles, spiritual muscles, etc. So that being here on earth would be a wasted trip. You're basically here to develop those muscles to be able to discern the truth from the falsity. The dark serves the light in the end. And this is something that it does help to remember. So at this point, what I've done is, and what Camelot was all about, was something rather unusual in the sense that we wanted to gather all the evidence from the top level of all the, interesting, above top secret witnesses, people that were researching, authors, etc., and put it together in a kind of like puzzle pieces, and describe what is the big picture of life on planet Earth, of who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. And without those answers, it's very hard to determine the decisions that are necessary in order to make your next steps or decide where you want to go as a being and as a civilization. So basically, we're asking those questions. There's no doubt whatsoever that our ancestors are from the stars. And I believe that everyone here is what I call a magus in training, a magician in training, call it what you will. In the end, we are from at least 12 ET races. This is the root of our beginnings, and that the incarnations or the seedings of humanity have been multiple to this planet. And they do happen in other places in the galaxies, multiverses out there, but this particular planet has a history of humanity being coming to this planet and then trying to grow that vehicle, if you will. And some of my information comes, obviously all of my information comes from the investigations I've done over the past 7 years and the investigations I did before I ever got into Project Camelot. and my own intuition. So if you're wondering where the providence of information, as they say, is coming from, that's what it is. It is interesting to note that almost all of the whistleblowers, whether they've worked for the government or they haven't, almost without exception, have developed levels of ET, extrasensory perception, or being psychic, remote viewing, other skills, other what I call superpowers, if you will, and that has been part of the package. And a lot of people kind of miss that when they see the government developing super soldiers or various employees of various kinds, whether they be CIA agents, NSA, alphabet agencies, par excellence, whatever that you want to call it. All of those people, the ones they look for are the ones that have excuse me, highly developed perception abilities, okay? And that aids them in the work for the dark or for the light, depending on which side they're on. Okay, there are two main paths. I call them angelic human or robotic Superman. And this is what I have figured out over years of just distilling down all of the information we've been getting. So without exception, it appears that call it the Illuminati, the powers that are running the planet at this time, they have an agenda. And that agenda involves taking the races of beings here, which are all human, starting out with a distillation of 12 races, the genetics from 12 off-planet races, as well as possibly one which may be pure, sort of original human, and then also going through the centuries and through the various seedings and adding even more various ET races to those seedings. And so you've got a huge compilation of races and genetics here on the planet Earth at this time. This is a genetic library. That's part of what you are. And you are also supposedly safeguarding that genetic library within yourselves, within the children. There is obviously genetic library that involves the plants and animals on the planet as well. So, in the end, you need to choose one of these two paths. And the dark side has basically chosen the side of the robotic Superman. That is all what they're aiming for. Some people call it transhumanism at this point, but it has to do with using technology, robotics, etc., nano, and AI to augment this human vehicle by this sort of artificial intelligence segment or aspect. And that is the aim they're going, okay? It's a path. And it basically is what I would call the dark side. Now, the light side can use these various tools as tools, but ultimately this vehicle that we call human, regardless of your genetic capability and composite, is capable of all kinds of super powers and basically doing almost everything that you can do as an augmented human using technology and nanobytes and all of this. But they choose to try to speed that path along. In other words, they don't want you to take the time to develop on your own. They don't want to give you the time to do that. They're all about power over others, and their purpose is to come to this planet to basically invade, to take over, to utilize you for various things, food, resources, you name it, whatever they happen to be after, and also to re-terraform the planet, and I'll talk more about that as we go through all of this. So in the end, what I consider is going on here is a battle. It's a battle for your hearts and minds and souls, and it is a battle on planet Earth. And you need to ultimately make a stand on one side of that battle or another and become polarized, in essence, to the positive or the negative. And this is written about in the raw material, if you are familiar, RA material. David Icke is very dedicated to that particular line of thought. I have read it, I've studied it, but I think that there's more to the story. I think Ashiana Dean had brought in another piece, and anyone who has not seen my interview with her, I do encourage you to do so. I traveled to India with her, I think it was about a year and a half ago. And I also have, spent time with her going to various conferences she's done. I've been analyzing her work and reading her books, Voyagers 1 and 2. Some of that information is not completely accurate. Some of it has changed over time. We are in a sort of a morphing field in which information does change. We are on a changing timelines, and some of what's going on here is a battle to either maintain a timeline or to shift a timeline. And so some of that, the dark side, the Illuminati, the secret space program, is involved in doing. Therefore, you vote with your feet, you vote with your energies, you vote with your intentions, in essence, either supporting their efforts or not. And just because you talk about the dark doesn't mean you're giving them energy, by the way. There's sort of misconception that, if you talk about what's coming or a negative thought, that you're basically feeding that to them. And if you give them love, that you could be feeding them love, energy, and that can make them stronger. So you make the dark stronger. So it's really interesting, because if you don't study this from sort of a philosophical angle, from the point of view of enlightenment, and if you don't really get into this in depth on a spiritual level, you don't realize what's really going on. And a lot of people out there, the sort of New Agers, are rather superficial in their approach. They sort of are black and white, and they don't realize some of the nuances. They can be so easily deceived and misled, and this is happening all the time. The dark side loves it when you're naive. So the more you know, gain all knowledge, as George Green would say, is one of the first principles in your quest here. And so this behooves you to really know what's going on, and not to turn and be blinded and simply want to be here in a blissful state of mind. That's not what this planet is about. It's not what your journey here is about, regardless of what you may think, in my opinion. And basically, this game here, this thing that you're a part of, is basically breaking through the matrix, seeing through the Maya that's around us, and coming to understand who you are on a really deep level, as a spirit, as a soul, visiting this planet, and taking the human vehicle for a purpose. And your purposes are very unique, each and every one of you, and very important to this overall game. So never never take yourself less than seriously, because you are extremely important, each one of you. And actually, the dark side knows this, and that's why they watch you so closely. So we are involved in a War of Worlds. What's going on with the War of Worlds? I mean, most people know some of the basic players in the field, and we could say Greys or Nordics or Reptilians, or and there are Anunnaki, and there are many permutations, many races. Clifford Stone said way back when we interviewed him, way in the beginning of Project Camelot, he was on the screen during my short film. And he basically said at that time he thought he had come across like 57 races that were visiting at that time, that he was aware of as an intuitive communicator. At this point, we hear that there are hundreds of them. So it's worthwhile to know that. It might not be possible for you to be familiar with each and every one of them. What I have noticed in my own life is that I am visited by various races from various places, and that those races that come to visit me are often genetically related to me in a sort of extra amount of genetics. So for example, I've been visited by an Anunnaki, I've been visited by Andromedan, I've been visited by this amphibious sort of plant-like woman person who sang in this most extremely amazing voice and talked to me all night long. And just because you're visited, are not necessarily abducted. And so there are lots of sort of permutations of all of those experiences. And, and these are experiences that you did elect to have coming in. I mean, we do write our own screen, write our own parts in this play that we're in. And so I would urge you to value both the positive and the negative that you're experiencing, to understand that you're not a victim in any of it. No one is. That the people that come in here and are manipulated by the dark side have actually elected to have themselves dealt with in that way. It doesn't mean it's pleasant, doesn't mean you remember, and it doesn't mean you like it. What I'm saying is that at some point on a high level that you elected to come down here and experience these aspects because you wanted to learn something. You wanted to educate your awareness and bring some of these things in so that you could then go out and perform a mission, perhaps freeing others that were going down those deceptive paths or whatever. So it's never wasted, and in a certain sense, if you give blessing and you give thanks for where you are now and what you've experienced, it's a very positive thing to do in sort of releasing some of those energies so that you don't have to experience more necessarily. So in essence, you are all light warriors. I prefer that term over light workers. I think light workers comes from the Matrix. I think that there's a sort of misconception there. And it's understandable that a lot of our language comes from the Illuminati, comes from what they're trying to program you to believe about yourselves. And that includes that you're limited, that you're stupid, that your intelligence, IQ can be measured, which it cannot, but not by their methods, which are incredibly antiquated in terms of the multiverse. But you have what's called emotional intelligence, which is a combination of the heart and the mind, which is absolutely not measured at this time on planet Earth. And the other thing is that it's a rather rare thing in the galaxies or multiverses, and certain entities like reptilians and certain others, greys, and so on, don't have these abilities, and so they can't even understand them. And this is what gives you an advantage. So we can make the human race as robotic as you like, but nobody's going to be able to put the heart and the mind together and give you something more. That's what that addition creates. So there's a lot going on here that is not understood at this time. Okay, we've sort of covered that. Wait, how did I do that? Okay. So, by the way, I think some people watching this might go, oh, well, 2012 was non-happening. And I do understand that a lot of people perceive it that way. I have to say that I took a group to Egypt during that time, 3 weeks during the 2012 transition, and we experienced some amazing energies coming into the Great Pyramid and surrounding areas to Abydos, et cetera, et cetera. As an intuitive, I can go into a power place and feel the energies. I feel them through my hands and in my body. And I can also feel when earthquakes are coming, other things of that nature. And many of you have these abilities. You may not be aware that you have them. But at any rate, I can tell you that there was a substantial and is a continuing substantial shift going on here on planet Earth at this time. We are entering parts of the solar system. Our solar system is moving into the galactic center, and with that, we are being approached by various energies, apparently possibly what might be called a super wave of energy coming at the Earth at this time. That may involve planetoids, some of which are occupied, some of which are being called comets or asteroids that are used, actually that are driven in essence by various beings that occupy them. There is a lot of confusion out there, and I'm not making this stuff up. Again, when I talk about whatever I talk about, I'm drawing from whistleblower testimony. And what I do is I take and triangulate, and this is what all the agencies do as well. And you basically look for at least 3 independent sources coming up with the same information from completely different directions, who are not aware of each other, don't know each other, etc. And at that point, when you have a collision of those three essence, pieces of information, then you can begin to believe that that information may have some validity and continue down that road. Sometimes when only two things coincide, you might say, it's like what we call an orange flag. And these are basically sort of some of the techniques that agents will use to determine truth as well. Beyond that, of course, as an intuitive, you do have this ability to feel truth. In other words, it will resonate with you. You will know whether I am telling you the truth by the way it hits you and how it resonates with you. And I've often had people come up to me after I've been speaking and say, wow, I have never, felt a person up there being so completely, real, legitimate, not, faking anything or whatever. And that was a huge compliment to me because I know how easy it is for people to deceive other people. And there's a lot of that deception going on. A lot of people are, as I say, confused by what they think is the truth, and then they get very disappointed when they find out it's not true. So, okay, there is a method to activating your DNA and for raising your vibration, and it involves meditation. And many of you will already possibly be very, very well familiar with meditation, have your own techniques, etc. So I don't want to go down that road explaining, too much along those lines. But I can tell you that when I was around 21, when I came to the planet, I knew that I was going to try to achieve enlightenment in essence. And that would be my ability to do that had to do with linking the chakras and bringing the kundalini up through the crown chakra and joining with the chakras ahead, above that, as well as below your feet, which you have chakras that go beyond the obvious body, the 7 on the body. So I just set about doing that. And I have to say that I didn't study with any gurus, and I didn't have any advice, and nobody in my family was doing this. And I basically had the use of a loft in Soho, and I decided in, I guess it was like a 2-month period, to meditate every day on a technique that I discovered. I read some books about it. I sort of had some intuitive kind of, I have a sense I can read, I can find something, I know that that's all I need, and then I'll go with it. So I did that process, and I want to encourage each and every one of you to do this if you haven't done so already. A lot of people think that sort of higher consciousness is not physiological. They think it's just mental, and that's not the case. It involves the entire body, and it is absolutely manifest in every way. And all I can tell you is I know this for a fact. I've experienced it, and that's the only way to really truly know it. Some people are misled. They may activate a few chakras, think they're there already. And I could tell you that if you haven't had this completely earth-changing experience where you've seen the matrix melt and you become a part of all that is, then you haven't gotten there. And it's very profound, and it can last for several days, even weeks. After the experience, you have to reactivate periodically to bring that sort of experience back to you. But you do reach a sort of, it's like an ongoing experience, and eventually it stays on a certain level. You never really go down, back down to sort of a lower vibrational state, if you will. This is the kind of thing that the Illuminati are desperately afraid that you should ever do. And if I have time at the end of my presentation, I'll just flip through some evidence that I have for what I'm talking about that's visual on all the temples around the world in various religions. They all depict this path to enlightenment. And it's very interesting to me that most archaeologists it just blows right by them. They have no idea what they're looking at. So there is a war for your soul. Super soldiers are being used in other dimensions, by the way, in the ether, in the astral level. They are, so some super soldiers that may appear not so super in real life, in everyday life, at night they're being utilized, and sometimes they start to reveal it in their physicality. If you're adept at reading a person, you sometimes pick up these things. There's a lot of manipulation going on on those levels. The fourth dimension, we're at the top, really moving from third to the fourth. In fact, for all intents and purposes, we are now in what I call the fourth dimension. That dimension is completely occupied by ETs that are a lot of fourth dimensional type ETs, which are the service to self types. Okay, when I was talking about symbolism on the temple, so I was talking about, for example, Quetzalcoatl and the snake, the serpent energy, and so on, that feathers have to do with flight, have to do with ascension and rising above, etc. So the symbolism is everywhere for that. Okay, so we're looking at a lot of possible futures of humanity, and a lot of people are maybe confused as to what is our future and where are we going and what's really going on here on planet Earth. Let me say that I have been in contact with whistleblowers that have talked about Phobos being a command and control center. Phobos is a moon of Mars, and that it was put in place there, that it is hollow, it is occupied by the Anunnaki, that our space, secret space program is working with those beings. They are particularly tall, as you may know. Zachariah Sitchin talks a lot about them. They are humanoid for the most part, although there seems to be a strain of Anunnaki that are more reptilian in appearance. They are depicted on the temples in Egypt as well. Michael Tellinger is another person who's delved into sort of furthering the work, if you will, of Zachariah Sitchin, and has discovered these ruins in South Africa that have to do with Enki and the building of a laboratory there, etc., for the interference with the genetic manipulation of the genome, the human genome. That was only going back so far, but it is important to know that we go back even farther. So you've got many seedings of humans, some of which that have failed to really take root here and stay in sort of, I guess, contact and stay here on Earth. And so the reseedings had to happen. So we're looking at, if you read Ashiana Dean's work and you study what's going on, you'll notice that there's a lot of frequency that involves the robotic. Again, this robotic Superman is being sort of put out as a sort of attractant. It's a seduction of people that have a sort of resonance with the military frequency, who want to be more than they are, but they don't want to go through the natural work of raising their vibration and joining their chakras, etc. And they prefer to go by way of the robotic Superman. So this will be a choice. A lot of military have chosen that path. It is important to understand that souls do things for reasons that are sometimes not always obvious, and that a person who may be on one path for a period of time may have a plan to get to the other path, in other words, the path of the light, in this lifetime. So I urge people not to write off fellow human beings. Understand that we're here having a material existence, that we are all spirits, eternal souls, if you make it going on forever. And so you come here for this experience. You come here to help grow this whole idea, this amazing experiment in what we call this vessel that is then a composite of ET races who don't get along, and who created this vehicle called the human to bring together those races into one being and to meld them and to attempt to get along here on planet Earth with the various races that they've been warring with through the eons. So there is a lot of that kind of thing going on. And so understand that the wars you're experiencing and the things where you don't agree with somebody, or you may have anonymity towards somebody and you don't even know why, but it's very profound. These things are coming from your genetics, and you're bouncing off their genetics, the opposite somebody who is from maybe other races than you, their genetic components are different, and so on. So this is what we've got going on planet Earth. The robotic frequency is often called the Metatron frequency. Now, I know that there are some people out there that think Metatron is a really good thing, and I have to say that I would disagree with that. But, you know, again, you have to find your own way. So if you're resonating with that frequency and, you know, you enjoy what you're getting, whatever, it can be like a drug. You know, you try it for a while, you think it works, and eventually you realize you've been deceived. There are all kinds of religions, all kinds of opiates for the masses. You know, it's not up to me to tell you what's true or what's false necessarily. I can tell you what I know. I can tell you what conclusions I've reached. But I can also tell you that I keep an open mind always. And that's one of my strengths as a investigative journalist and a documentary filmmaker, is that I'm always questioning. And some people find that quite annoying, but other people like it and do understand how important it is for us to get the truth out of each other. In a sense, we're all voyagers. And as voyagers, you bring truth to the group. So sitting around here this weekend together, you each have a piece to contribute. You each have a truth to contribute. And you've been voyaging along certain lines. Some have been here on Earth, some other incarnations off Earth. In essence, you bring the knowledge with you. It's part of the package that you come in with. And so never sell that short. You need to not do that for yourself, but also don't do it for others. So if you see somebody in a role here and they're playing a certain role and you think they're always like that, they're simply not always like that. They are multi-dimensional beings just as you are, and they will have lived in multiverses of all kinds. Some of them will not remember, obviously. Others will have memories coming back all the time. It's a gift to have your memories come back to you, obviously. It's not always easy, though, I will say. A true memory will often have a lot of emotional sort of baggage along with it, and all kinds of, call it karma if you believe in karma, or whatever you want to call it, that you do need to work through. So remembering, a lot of people say, well, I want to remember everything. But actually, I don't think a lot of people out there can even handle the spiritual load that is required to really remember, because you remember the responsibility that you didn't take, or you did take, or whatever happened, and maybe you would have played it differently. So again, you get a chance to do so when you come back in. There are some invasion scenarios going on here on Earth. A lot of people like to think that we are waiting for ET, disclosure and all of this sort of thing. From my point of view, after all this interaction with over 7 years of whistleblowers and researchers and authors and really working, I have to say, 18-hour days constantly, because I just sort of, I don't know, this had to be my mission, and we never got tired of doing this, so we never stopped. And so I very rarely take time away, and actually just lately have been taking a little more time away from Camelot to try to push Camelot out in some new directions, and I'll talk about that. So if somebody can wave at me and tell me how far along I am in terms of time, I don't want to keep anyone. They said that you might need to eat dinner at a certain point, so I was supposed to leave time for that.
We were going to do 5 more minutes and then questions.
5 more minutes and then, oh boy. Okay, that's going to be fun. Okay, so, there are a lot of scenarios for the future. You can create your own. The last one here is Ashiana Dean, basically talking about activating 12-strand DNA at a minimum, the retreat of the service to self beings that are now dominating the planet. Some feel that we've sort of come halfway, that we've turned a corner at this point. And it is, I believe that part of the 2012, if you will, energetics are that there is a significant, what you might call critical mass on the Earth at this time, that has allowed this seeding of humanity to begin to move on, and that we are going to be ascending in groups eventually off the planet and going elsewhere. when a group ascends to going beyond this level, this sort of 3D going on 4D, that's considered a plus. That's considered sort of a graduation, and that's a positive for humanity. And they are out right now, the secret space program. They are sending ships out beyond the solar system. They are doing trade-offs with other races. There's a ET race that's supposedly coming into Africa. They've given them Africa. They're planning on decimating the current population of Africa. The Chinese know this. They're building cities for these incomers. They plan to administrate those incomers, whoever they are. I have heard that they are very likely from, Aldebaran, and that they relate to the sort of Nazi lineage. That's a very important part of the Illuminati sort of genome, if you will, and that they are terraforming the planet at this time. The methane, the chemtrails, the radiation, all of it is a terraforming, changing that's happening to this planet. It is now massive. It is now, I guess you might say, to some degree irrevocable. Although I do have at least one major contact witness who has told me that, you know, they do have in the secret space program the ways and means to reverse things like all of the geoengineering that they're currently doing. But the fact of the matter is that they don't want to. They want to bring in these races, the gray human hybrids, which means half gray, half human, if you can appreciate that. So those children being born now, coming into Earth, some are could even be among us, they do have half gray. So we are going to have to deal with that race, that genetics, that sort of proclivity that has to do with a very intellectual side that has is somewhat unfeeling, okay? And there's other baggage that comes along with that. So we as a planet have, I guess, elected to have that happen to our genome because it's happened. The abductions have resulted in a very successful, from what I understand, gray human hybrid situation. And oh gosh. Okay, well, forget that. So, let's see. Okay, I probably am over my 5 minutes at this point, so I will take questions. You know, I could go on for quite a long time, and there's a lot more to it. I do encourage people to read my blog if you want to know what's going on. Most whistleblowers right now, by the way, due to the sort of clamping down on journalists and whistleblowers everywhere, are not going before the camera, okay? So a lot of the whistleblowers that really have good information, that is new information that can further your understanding about what's going on beyond what's already out there, are afraid to go on camera. So you will not see Camelot doing that many interviews with whistleblowers, in case people are wondering. I do interview as many people as possible that bring pieces of the puzzle. I continue to do that on radio shows, online, special interviews, and there's constant, I mean, I'm constantly putting out material for free on Project Camelot. I also do these Camelot roundtables, which are not terribly successful, but they are a meeting of the minds of peers, in other words, researchers, whistleblowers, and experiencers who come together to discuss various topics. I have, for the past few years, been doing that. That is basically a small online virtual conference. It requires a lot of time away from my regular work to organize, and I do charge for those. At this point, I charge what is, in essence, a movie ticket. And that's to try to keep myself alive and to pay my rent, because the donations have also gone down over the past year or so. Although I am still getting donations when I ask for them. People have been very generous. If you're one of those people, you're here. I want to thank you very much for making this mission continue to be possible. And Tommy Hansen, who's often been with me for the past over 3 years as my webmaster, has been working for free most of the time. Occasionally, I can afford to pay him something. And at this time, we'd like to fly him back to the United States. He's desperate for a plane ticket. We can't afford it. So if you want to go onto my website, I've said that on my blog, so just go back some previous blogs or go to the donate page where I explain that. and send money directly to him. His email address is there. He would really appreciate that. He doesn't want to stay in Norway. He prefers to be in the U.S. He's made a lot of friends there, and it's easier for him to work with me. My base is in the U.S. in California. Okay, so that's it, and I'm going to quit at this point, and you can ask whatever questions you may have, and I can, try to show you some things on the computer if that is involved. Thank you.
I apologise for sort of cutting it short. I know it's a multifarious sort of subject linking all of these different subjects together, and I'm honoured that Kerry provides a platform for these guys, the whistleblowers, Andrew Basagio and Drake, and even Bill Cooper was an original military employee that came forward. And if anyone knows Bill Cooper's work, the Pale Horse, as I said, he was one of the first and one of my favourites. So I'm honoured that Kerry has come here tonight. So if there's any questions, and you can just voice them, use the diaphragm, darlings, and voice them, then we'll be able to communicate from the very depths to our Kerry over here. So is there any questions? Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Kerry, do you know who the British intelligence are working with?
You mean which ETs?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure they're working with some Nordics. The U.S. and British intelligence work very closely together, and the information would be that they're working with Nordics. They're certainly working with the Aldebaran groups that are already here, some of which are arriving. They are, the British intelligence work for the for the Illuminati, who are also working for the Anunnaki. So, and they are based underground in Dimona in Israel. Actually, I'm working on I'm putting music together with Camelot right now, and we're working on a song that's talking about all of this. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, the Anunnaki are underground in Israel. They are also walking the halls of the Pentagon, to quote Bob Dean. And British, and you can basically say British and Americans are working with the same groups of ETs for sure. Let's see, the Vatican is the other sort of strong arm on planet Earth, and the reptilians are pretty much running the Vatican, and the Jesuits are part of that scenario. So I think there's some very interesting dynamics going on. One thing that happened rather recently, you may remember, when the new Pope was coronated, or whatever they do with popes, Biden went to pay his respect to the Pope at the Vatican, while Obama at the same time came to Israel to basically pay homage to the Anunnaki, of which he is a human hybrid from the Anunnaki strain. And that all is very obvious. Richard Hoagland is aware of it, talks about it occasionally. Jordan Maxwell. And by the way, I've been meeting with Jordan Maxwell lately, and he's got some new pieces of the puzzle that he's been talking with me about. I'm going to try to put together a speaking engagement for him. He wants to sort of tell the world what he's come up with in terms of who the rulers of planet Earth are, what's going on, furthering the whole big picture from his perspective. So that's very, very interesting, and he's a fascinating individual. If you don't know his work, I do encourage you to investigate Jordan Maxwell. I did quite what I believe is a very good interview with him, so you can find that on Project Camelot. It's over 2 hours long, which most of my interviews are. I do want to draw your attention to Camelot in Malta. We are planning an expedition to Malta, looking for the signs of Atlantis. I believe there were some things left behind in Malta from Atlantis, from the fall of Atlantis. I don't know that we'll necessarily find them, but I'm trying to put together an expedition and also bring along members of the public that want to join us. We are planning to do it in October 21st through November 2nd or 4th. of this year. If that doesn't happen, if we can't get everyone together by then, we'll try to do it probably in the spring. But this is the plan. And so there is a place on Project Camelot. You just click on the banner on the Camelot site, which looks like this, and register your interest if you might be interested in joining us. It will be fascinating, I can assure you. And so hopefully I've answered your question. Yes?
You say there's many races on this planet. Do you have a rough timeline for when they arrived? Just roughly.
Well, actually, the Voyager books by Oceana Dean, which were in essence downloaded into her consciousness, she doesn't consider it channeled material. She considers that it comes like in packets, and she writes it out and draws it out. She's a graphic artist. So she brought in this information that's in the Voyager books, and it is fascinating. You couldn't make this stuff up. Once you start reading it, I think you won't help but agree with me, at least that far, that the information is phenomenal. The technical detail in terms of delineating the various races, the wars between the various races that have been going on through the eons, the seedings of humanity, and the path that we are on towards ascension, in essence. It's all depicted there. For the most part, it seems quite accurate.
Is it too much for a basic overview, or?
Sorry?
Is it too much for a basic overview? Because I haven't read any of her work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's way too much. I can say the more recent history involves the Anunnaki interfering with our DNA, such that we have what we call junk DNA, which is not junk at all. And they put what is in essence a frequency fence in our. Because what happened in terms of the Anunnaki, and it's all written in the Sumerian tablets, Zechariah Sitchin popularized it, but it's actually written in those tablets, has to do with the genetic experimentation on the human and basically trying to dumb them down. There seem to be two strains of human created at that time. One group is called sort of the administrators, and they take orders very well. The other side has a much more rebellious gene, what I call a rebel gene, and they were not as obedient, and they were the ones that Enki was more interested in and developed in Africa and South Africa, etc. So there's an interesting discontinuity. If you listen to my Super Soldier interview with Michael Prince that I did recently, and Max Spears, and in that Michael Prince, he basically comes out and says that he's working for the Fourth Reich, which is the Illuminati, and he's proud to be doing that. Was kind of a very important moment historically for someone to come out and say that publicly, all these years after the initial sort of Third Reich, the Nazis, and so on. So they're now at a point where they're starting to become very in your face. They're starting to try to show you their power in much more sort of totalitarian ways, rolling out these agendas here in Britain, absolutely, in the United States as well, various other countries. But no doubt about it, they're sort of on another. They're on steroids right now, trying to push their point across, trying to take control of humanity, because we're basically, the genie is out of the bottle, you may say. In essence, you have escaped, you're beginning to escape, they know it, they can't control us, and I'm here to make sure that you remain uncontrollable and become worse, actually. So, but it is extremely complex.
Here already that are the antidote, if you like, to this super soul, to the angelic human children. How can we best help those to reach their own true potential?
I would say that you allow them to meditate, for one thing, allow them to activate themselves. Also, child is father to the man. I think that was sort of a prophetic, one of the good sayings that came out of the Bible, if you will. And allow them to lead when they feel so moved. Give them as much freedom, personal freedom as possible, but also give them structure if they require it and they ask for it. In other words, I guess, well, one of our most famous, if not our most famous interview was with Bariska, who is known as an indigo child from Mars, who came in at 7 years old and was telling his mother and all the people around him on the streets in his small town in Russia that he remembered being a soldier on Mars, and that he could read somebody and tell them what was wrong with their life, what was right with it. He was quite psychic at that point. He basically knew his history, and that interview contains the information, a lot of the information he was still remembering, although he was starting to forget. We interviewed him when he was about, I think he was around 12, if I recall. Now he's like 18 or something. And so I'm not sure where he's at now. Have been trying to get back in touch with him. Hasn't happened. Would love to do a follow-up interview. We were the only people that flew to Moscow and St. Petersburg to interview Bariska back in those days. So we did it against all odds, and really it was quite an extraordinary trip. If you haven't seen our Bariska interview, I encourage you to do so. So as far as helping them, Bariska is a great example. In some ways, I believe he's actually the leader of what you might call the new children. Although I consider myself, if you want to call us advanced indigos, whatever, one of those. I felt a very strong simpatico with Bariska on an intuitive level, etc. And I think that the young children, by and large, have these same abilities that he does, and he sort of demonstrates them. It's a challenge, no doubt, to have some of the children coming in now because they are so advanced. And they're bringing a lot of their awareness with them. In other words, they are not forgetting when they come through the veil, as they call it. And that's a good thing, but it can also be a burden for them, memories, as I said, and for you. And so, yeah, you really do have to, you have to break through your own programming. And I see a lot of people who try to sort of put their programming on their kids, regardless of what level the child is at. So I would basically say breaking through your own programming, recognizing it for what it is, and then moving beyond it is a really good way to go. But just open their horizons. Let them experience. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was an investigative journalist who was killed recently in a car accident. Do you know if there's any link to what he was researching to the material you're talking about?
Well, that's funny you should mention that, because I was just researching that today. I think you mean Michael Hastings, the Rolling Stone journalist, and he was apparently fairly young. He totaled his car at some really bizarre accident. The engine leapt out of the car and blew up, and it was just like ran into a tree and all this craziness. As a matter of fact, I am looking to investigate down that trail and figure out why they killed him, because there's no doubt in my mind they killed him. Even intuitively, I got that hit when I first heard about it. So what I have found so far is that the man that he was basically embedded with in Afghanistan, his name is McChrystal, he was a general who then lost. He was in charge of all the Afghan troops and our whole military adventure, if you want to call it that, in Afghanistan. He spent months and months getting to know him, writing a book about him, and ultimately what the general told Michael Hastings got the general fired. He was asked to retire, in essence, by Obama, and now then they put in Petraeus, from what I understand. That general had been very heavily involved in, from what I know, black projects. That's what I have found out so far. And so the fact that he was involved in black projects tells me a lot about that individual. because I can tell you for a fact that it's quite possible that this is why that journalist was killed, because he was moving out of the realm of just the conventional war sort of scenario and probably got close enough to McChrystal even to get off the record information that then would become dynamite in the hands of a mainstream journalist. So even at this point, WikiLeaks is not going into above top secret. So you can appreciate they do everything they can to keep me off the radar. They play all kinds of games, and I'm very aware of those games. And I can tell you that there's no doubt whatsoever that that's what they're doing. The last thing they want is for someone like me, who's been well versed in the Black Project area, to get let loose in the mainstream journalism kind of mode of journalism. So they do the best to keep Camelot on the fringe. They've been successful so far for the most part. Although, sometimes I'll be out hiking in some bizarre place like Ireland, and somebody recognized me there, and it was like, oh my God, Kerry Cassidy, welcome. And there was like asking for passage through his farm. And he said, yes, as long as Kerry Cassidy will come over and shake my hand or something. So it was, I mean, I can say that they have worked really hard to keep us off the radar, but every now and then we do get through with one thing or another. But this journalist, Michael Hastings, I believe, based on my investigations so far, and I haven't been able to validate that information, but my theory at this moment, having learned that, and I found it in the information, if you do a lot of research, you'll see that this individual, General McChrystal, was working in the Black Project area before he was assigned to
There's
Afghanistan.
some link to John Brenner as well, that he was investigating him now, who is ex-CIA director.
Oh, okay.
So that was the most recent thing that I heard.
Okay, we'll look into that. Yeah, I mean, it is important. I am following, of course, you must be following the Snowden information, and you know that the partner of Greenwald was detained at at Heathrow, and that they went through all his stuff, and they burned at the Guardian, they burned this laptop, pretending that in essence, if you burn a laptop, you destroy files, which anyone knows, who knows anything, basically knows that, that's not going to be the only place that information resides. So it was a ludicrous display of drama for the public. I guess they think the public is just incredibly dumb, or they really want you to think that the limits of their surveillance capability is limited to being able to grab a laptop and, erase it by burning it. I mean, it's just so ludicrous. I wrote a whole article, by the way, on my blog about this. I go into all different aspects of what's really going on. It's important to know that anything that goes on in the mainstream news, there are aspects where the Illuminati are, it's a planted story. They're manipulating it to a certain purpose. So I never read a news item, I don't care what it is, without thinking that there is something behind that, and that it's often the complete opposite of whatever they're saying is true. So, and I encourage you to do the same. I have to say it's paid off very well, doing it that way, reading news that way. When they say they're not resigning, for sure they're going to resign, right? So it's like that syndrome.
I got one.
Yes?
All this like warring and good and evil and ETs fighting and stuff, they just part and parcel of duality, and it'll just go on forever. And there's no end to it until you transcend it.
Well, I mean, certainly in this sector of the multiverse at this level, if you're talking about 3D going into 4D, yes, that's the drama that goes on there. From what I understand, the ETs that mostly inhabit the 4D level, they are all about service to self, and they are also pursuing that for their, sort of, genetic pool, whatever you want to call it. and maybe ascension will never be an option for them. There is always the possibility. I mean, there are some grays that have moved from service to self to service to others. Sorry?
Interested in them, I'm talking about us. If we just focus on duality, all this good and evil and fighting and strife, it goes on forever until you transcend it.
I guess I'm not sure what you're saying. If you're asking if you only focus on duality, will you transcend? And I will say that. Sorry?
So whilst you're stuck in duality, this crap that goes on forever. And there's no point in just entertaining it. You might as well transcend it.
Well, absolutely. But in other words, one of the things you can do, and one of the things you do when you basically, meditate for a period of time, join your chakras and move above, you are transcending on an energetic level. And as you do that, you are basically joining the opposites into a union, a oneness. And you are realizing that. So you begin to embody that. You raise the vibration once you've done that here on planet Earth. You walk into a room and you will raise the vibration of the people around you. This can be a mission. Anyone else? Yes?
Are there any credible news for the future? Anyone predicting anything credible? There was this guy on your website who was talking about a earthquake in California and then Ribu and the 7 planets and so on, and suddenly it was off your website. Was he any credible? Was there anything to it?
Well, I'm not sure which person, because there have been so many people predicting these things. Cliff High is very well known for having predicted a number of these things. We interviewed Patrick Gerald a long while back, putting actually a disclaimer, which was unusual for us, because he was basically saying, for all intents and purposes, the world was going to end, or certainly humanity as we know it, in December or even before then of 2012. We didn't agree with him. The information we'd been getting didn't agree with him. But we interviewed him anyway because he was somebody who was going down a certain line and had some scientific basis and so on. And so we put the interview out there. There have been a number of people, Cliff High included. I'm not going to name all the names. There's somebody out there named Patty Broussard, for example, who's saying these kinds of things as well. I believe that he, because there's some confusion as to whether it's a he or a she. From what I understand, it's a man who is now wants to be a woman, so he called himself a woman. But he is a man still. From what I understand, from the sister came forward. That was the latest thing I read. That may be slightly out of date, as these things seem to change daily. But in essence, Patty Broussard had been working for NASA and NOAA, and had come forward and said that these various things are going to be happening. Now, it is true we're going through Earth changes. These things are happening. It is very likely that there will be some more major Earth changes as we go along this trajectory. In fact, there's no doubt about it. I've had dreams that we're going to have meteor showers, for example. Had those dreams years ago. Laura Knight Jedzik has been talking about that for years on her website, SOTT, SOTT.net. That's her news broadcast or bulletin that she puts out. And there are various intuitives that have been claiming this. Some people talk about it as if they just thought of it. There's Courtney Brown, who's got his remote viewers, who had been seeing certain Earth changes that would be happening by June of 2012. He recently came back on my show and started talking about why that didn't happen the way they thought it would. I have to say, I don't agree with his interpretation of what his remote viewers came up with. I believe that if you hire these remote viewers and they are at all accurate ever on what they're seeing, and they come up with details, that there is a good reason to believe that those details are integral to their success as a remote viewer, certainly, and to what we call hits. And therefore, to throw all of that out and just say that they got the essence, in my view, is not sufficient. However, I did a very involved, what is called a Camelot Roundtable with Courtney Brown recently. It's on my website for free. You can get it on YouTube. And it goes on for like 3 hours. He's talking all about how he worked with the remote viewers, how he sees what they saw in the future. My take on it, which I do talk about within the body of the thing, is basically that his remote viewers, if they're good at what they do, likely we're seeing at least another timeline or something ahead in our timeline. But he locked it down to a certain time here on Earth, which is June of 2012, which was, in my view, mistaken. So his time was wrong, their information might be right. That doesn't mean it's going to be right tomorrow, and it doesn't even mean it's right on this timeline. But I can tell you that enough of their information does follow enough whistleblower information about what is being planned, first of all, by the Anunnaki, because they will cause these things to happen even if they don't happen naturally. So there's that trajectory going on. Now they may be prevented by the light, by your energetics, by the numbers of humans to start to wake up. All of this is a changing sort of scenario. And so people that are predicting the future, in my view, are often going to be wrong just out of the gate. They may be right sometime, but saying you're going to have an earthquake sometime is just not being a psychic, in my view. Or saying you're going to be inundated by water somewhere, or saying it's, there's going to be a meteor over Russia. Well, yes, there was what people thought was a meteor or an asteroid, but basically, according to my whistleblowers, was a craft. So it was piloted, it was shot down, it contained a lot of ETs. There were miniature ETs around the size of the ones that Greer was trying to, foist on the public, although that particular ET was not, I don't think of the race that was in that particular vehicle. The race, Greer was bringing forward this particular, I realized they basically said it was a stunted, human. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that it's a hybrid of some kind, human ET hybrid. That's just my take on it. So information comes and goes. My blog has a tremendous amount of information, and we've got all these videos, huge Camelot library at this time. So the thing whatever you were looking at, didn't disappear off Camelot. It's just that so much comes along that it might have gotten buried over something that came after that. So, if you remember a specific name and so on, I can help you find it if you're interested. So I think probably it's about time for them to go to dinner. Is that what you want?
I don't know if dinner was the thing. I think most human beings can only not wee for 1 hour 35 minutes.
Okay.
I work it on either standard cigarette breaks or the need for the urinary.
All right. So let's call it a day, because there's no hands being raised at this moment.
It's a perfect moment. I think we should say thanks very much. There's a lot of people out there that do that sort of foundation work, the due diligence, before we come along and sort of take their event horizon. The summarisation of 5 years of research is given in a 2-hour talk, and we can say thanks very much and we're honoured that you can do that for us. We're all looking for a cipher. You know what a cipher is? That sort of mini codex, that code. So if you listen to Judy Wood and she says this is how the towers fell, that's a code. And this is one of the sort of codes now with time travellers and super soldiers and drone type people with chips inside their heads. Or do we just celebrate this and know we can defeat them with the power of love and unity? So I think we say thank you very much. There is no dinner, I think. There's going to be about a bit of music, really. There's a chance.
There is food, though, right?
There is food.
I had some of the food. It's quite good. So
yeah, we got a vegetarian cooking. So there was food, but I think that may be a myth now. So what we're going to do really is a chance to give people a chance to have a chill out. Is we're going to light the fire, and then Andy Hickey's going to play a few tunes, and he's really he's the soundtrack for the gathering.